I'm just wondering, should we open the back doors or is it just... Should we open the front doors and the side doors and let some air in? Guess what we're going to talk about tonight? Jesus on Soul Talk. Do you know, on Sunday, we were talking about what lies beneath. And really, when we talk about what lies beneath, we're talking about, on the inside, in our soul, what's residing on the inside. And we kind of looked at John Mark, who had preferences, and his preferences drove him. The problem was he didn't really understand, and it took him 10 years out of his life, probably following. He could have been following and running with Paul and all the work Paul was doing. He get lost and caught up with Barnabas, and you don't hear much in the Bible about Barnabas and Mark when they went out on their mission journey, and Silas and all that breakup. And you think, wow, it took 10 years because he made one wrong move. And it started off in his soul. And then we looked at Jonah, and we said, well, Jonah had a problem because he had... I'm trying to search for the word at the moment because it escaped my head. But he had prejudice running in his heart, and he looked at the Ninevites and he said, well, I don't really like the Ninevites. Probably I think it speaks to me, or it should speak to us a lot, because we're very prejudiced in this country. Whether you like it or not, we're very narrow-minded, and we have difficulty when somebody wants to have a different point of view. So we tend to pick sides a lot, and we don't realize it, and we get caught up in things. We looked at the 12 who were in the boat with Jesus in the storm, and they had this pampering perspective. In other words, I love you, Jesus. Nothing should ever go wrong in my life. Because if you care for me, my life will be just sweet. And I've met loads of Christians who think that. Why is this happening to me? Because you're you. And you live in the same world as me, and the world we live in is just fallen and it's broken, and you and me are broken, and you start to realize, now I'm not saying that God doesn't look after us. What I'm saying is sometimes we have this pampering perspective. I want life to look right, and it doesn't really work that way. Now, these guys that we looked at on Sunday all missed the move of God. We all missed an opportunity because of what was happening. What we said, what lies beneath, or what happened in their soul. They allowed things into their soul that they'd never worked out before. They thought this would be okay. They neglected the problems that were in their soul. When we talk about soul, we're talking about our mind, our will, and our intellect, and our volition. In other words, what makes you you? And I don't know how you break that down in psychological terms. I probably could have a go at it, but it doesn't really matter. It's what makes you you. You're more than a body. You're more than the spirit of life that God put in you, So, and God talks about being in the soul. And if we neglect problems in our soul, you're going to have problems in your life. That's just the way it is. If you do not check the stuff that's coming into your life emotionally and learn how to arrest that stuff before it checks into your life to stay, you're going to find yourself in a place where your emotions and your feelings that have got into your soul because you take time to work it out are going to shape your life. They're going to take you somewhere. They're going to mess with you. And this is what, when I'm sure you're like me and you read and you watch lots of stuff. And if we do not take the time, it's amazing how you and I will search out and pursue all the stuff we don't need. I'm going to say that again. We will pursue all the stuff we don't need. We will pursue tapes and books and consume it, and it's not what we need. And Jesus wants to challenge and talk to us tonight about our soul, because he finds it very, very, very important, this whole idea about soul, that I tend to think that we miss and we let slip by. Probably over the next couple of Wednesdays tonight, we're just going to touch in it, Jesus' soul talk. But I want to look at the tortured soul, the restless soul, or the heavy soul, because the Bible's just full of this stuff saying, you better look at this. And we tend not to. We get into worship, we get into prayer, we get into I'll push on through, and Jesus is looking saying, your problem is your soul. And if you do not address this, you will just push and push until you're broken because you haven't cared for what you should care for. And He's challenging us. We get rules, we get systems, anything that doesn't really help us. We look in the wrong place, hoping that we'll find something that will help us, that won't. Psalm 42, and look, I'm going to read some scripture tonight, just really to emphasize Jesus wants to talk to you and I about our soul, okay? Psalm 42, 1 and 2 says this. What do you hear? As the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Let me just break that down real quick for you. If my soul is not panting for God, I'm panting for the wrong thing. That's what the psalmist is telling me. If you're panting for anything else, if you're panting for change's sake, and there isn't a drive in you to say, oh God, I'm so hungry for you, you're panting for the wrong thing. And He's looking for you and I to get our mind off what it's on and start focusing on the right thing. Sometimes we look for changes, or we look for help, or we look for a fix. And here the psalmist has said, if you're not panting for God, if your soul, he didn't say your body, he didn't say your mind, he didn't even say your spirit, he said your soul. If it's not panting for God, there's something that's gone wrong in you, and you will end up and you'll do crazy things because of it. The interesting thing is, it'll not come up on the screen, but I was thinking about it just tonight when I was down here, and I'm going to read it to you. Out of the book of Genesis, when God created Adam, it says that God breathed into his body. Okay? Now, let me just read it to you. It's Genesis 2, verse 7. It says this. Then the Lord God formed the man, that's Adam, of the dust from the ground, and He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living, it'll say there a creature, but the word is soul. He became a living soul. Now, why I'm reading that to you, because I want you to understand, you're not a body with a soul. And you need to get that in your head. You're a soul with a body. If you don't work, you see, we live our lives according to our body and what our body dictates and what we think we should do and all that carry on, but God said, I didn't create you that way. And during the fall, that gets all mixed up. Rather than us stopping and thinking, do you know what? There's something that we need to look at and think about. And Jesus comes with this soul talk. Now, the first thing I want to bring to you is Jesus actually warns people about being anxious. That's the 21st century, the 20th century, the 19th century, the 18th century. Go back as far as you want. That's the problem. Anxiety. Anxiety actually deals with worrying about the future. Guilt deals with worrying about the past. So if you're guilty tonight, it's because you're worried about the past and what people think of you. But if you're anxious, you're worried about your future. And that all deals with your soul. If you're caught in anxiety, it's because your soul is sick. And Jesus wants to address you and I, because is there anybody here that hasn't been anxious? Is there anybody here that hasn't felt guilty? Those are things that reside in our soul. And you see, we don't really understand that. We ascribe to it, but we live different. And the Lord's really looking to say, I want you to understand what's wrong in your soul. So we start off when He comes to people and He says, I want to warn you about, I want to give you a soul warning. And I'm going to read a very familiar passage to you. But when we read it, we're going to think, this is talking about my soul. And if we go to Matthew 6, verse 25, and it runs like this. The pericope here is saying, do not be anxious. Therefore, I tell you, Jesus speaking, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to a span of life. And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field and how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothed the grass of the field, and today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Therefore, because of all this, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. And he goes on, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble, Roy. Roy sent me that today. Jesus is actually looking at people who are getting caught up with, I'm worried about eating, I'm worried about clothing, I'm worried about drinking. And what we're reading here is that God knows what their needs are. God's saying, like, I actually know what you need. And somewhere we need to hear this, because we've all kind of admitted that we get anxious. Am I right or wrong? So as much as we read this, it doesn't actually touch our soul. It might touch your mind. Might get you just thinking for a bit. You might memorize that verse. You might say, yeah, I know that. You might have heard 20 verses on it. But if you've been anxious, even today, it's because it hasn't touched your soul. And Jesus is looking and saying, I want to address your soul because your soul's an issue. And I want to address it in order that you get a hold of this. Because this is what's lying underneath this skin. I breathed life and you became a living soul. You changed when I done that to you. It isn't about eating or drinking or what you wear or about tomorrow. Jesus actually tells us in these verses what you need to know, what your soul needs to know when you're anxious is that God knows. God knows. And I know you know God knows because we always say God knows. But there's a difference between knowing God knows and knowing the words God knows. There's a difference when it moves from your head into your heart and you sit in the middle of a mess and say, but God knows. And there's life on the inside because you're a living soul and it's alive unto God. Again, Jesus comes and he wants to talk to us about our soul because it's one of his things that he likes to do. He finds a rich fool and he rebukes him. You probably heard the story, but he rebukes him because he forgot about his soul. So let's just start tonight with rebuking each other and saying, you forgot about your soul. Is that cheeky? I hope it is, because I had to think it through for a bit. In the book of Luke 12, verse 16, we hear what Jesus says. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentiful. This is about a rich fool. And he thought to himself, this rich dude, what shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops? And he said, I'll do this. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. It's like getting a pension. I'm only teasing you. Do get a pension, by the way. And I will say, what do you hear what he says? This rich man's not so stupid. He says, I'm going to say to my soul, I'm going to say to the very essence on the inside of me, do you know what? Put your feet out, get some wine into you because you've done really well. Just sit down. This guy's communicating to his soul. He's aware that he's conscious. Your soul talks about you being conscious of who you are. And he's saying, I'm going to say to me, this is what I'm going to do. He's got this whole plan going, how he's going to deal with his life. And he says, listen, I'm going to say to my soul. I mean, that's kind of nuts when you're thinking like that. I'm going to say to my soul. I will tear down my barns, I will build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I'll say to my soul, soul, hey, Lewis, hey, whoever you are, you have ample goods laid up. You've done well. You've got this all together. You've worked this all out for many years, so just relax. Just chillax eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this night your soul is required. The very essence of who you are. When you thought you had this all together, you neglected your soul, and here he is talking to him. The things you have prepared, your soul is required of you, and the things you've prepared, who's they going to be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. In other words, there's something in your soul that caused you to be rich toward God that you can sow into. Because God's saying, I want your soul. I want the essence of who you are. So here we've got Jesus looking and saying, do you know what? I want to talk to the anxious heart, and I want to talk to the rich fool, the person who forgot about his soul. It's not about him having money, it's about his forgetfulness to realize, I'm a living soul. He had missed everything about life and thought, well, this is what I'll do. Maybe he was a businessman, Henry, for years, working his stuff. I don't know. Wearing shorts in church. Like, that's just wrong. But he was caught with building bigger barns. And he thought, I want to make more room in my soul for what I think is important for my soul. And there's a real fundamental mistake. God says, you haven't worked this through with me. And he says, you've been a fool. He said to his soul, relax. You've made it. Just relax. It's interesting that Jesus looks to rebuke him for forgetting his soul. Remember on Sunday, we said that what you feel is data. Information that you get is data. It doesn't become an emotion until you give it a meaning. Many people work that out this week. Did you get something coming into your head and you think, now if I attach a reason to what I just thought, I have a problem because I've empowered it. It's just data. It's just data until you give it a meaning. If you give it a meaning, it bursts in emotion. When it bursts in emotion, it will drive you. And I give the illustration of a car that costs £50,000. You remember I said that? And I said, it doesn't mean anything to me unless I want to buy the car. And I give it meaning. I want to buy that car for $50,000. And all of a sudden I'm going, oh, I might need to get a loan. Well, I might be able to go on holiday. Well, I might need to not eat for a while or whatever. And all of a sudden you give the money meaning. That 50,000 means, so it starts to drive you. Where if you're not wanting to buy the car, it's just data. You think, who cares what it costs? And that's how we get caught so often with stuff that comes into your head. Because I really believe that's what happened to John Mark. I really believe it. He was sucked in by a guy called Elymas the magician, or Bar Jesus. He was sucked in by his intelligence. He was sucked in by what he said, and he moved him away from the faith, very simply, because he believed the data and put a meaning to it. I really believe at Antioch, Mark was deceived along with Barnabas. He's bound to have been there. Sucked in with Peter and the boys when they became hypocrites. And they decided, well, we're changing our stance. And they went away and decided we're not eating in Gentiles. And they changed the gospel approach. I really believe he was caught up with that. And it came through data. And you give data life once you give it a meaning that touches your emotions, becomes a feeling, and that starts to drive you and I. Why am I saying that? Because you've got to be careful with the data that comes into this log, this head. Why? Because it changes you internally. And it changes me internally. Because it touches into our who we are in our soul. I give you the illustration. If you've got pain, you might think you're dying. For another person who got pain, they think, this is good, I'm healing. It's all what you attach to it. But yet so often we get caught in the wrong place. And we don't want to get caught there. That would be deceptive. Can I tell you something about, I'm talking about your soul tonight, and this is Jesus' word, by the way, the whole book. Just in case, you know, it's not in red in your Bible, and you're thinking, why is that not in red? He wrote the whole thing through the Holy Spirit. Let me just read something to you. Here's a big shout out to the church, okay? This is the apostle of love, they call him John. I'm going to hear what he says. And I know there's lots of people preaching this, so have I. And I haven't said what I'm going to say tonight, but just hear me. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health, as it is or as it goes well with your what? He's saying, look, your soul's okay, but maybe your body's sick. But what he's drawing out is this. It's really, really important to understand that your soul needs to be well. And it's one of the things that's neglected in so many churches. And you can tell by how people speak to one another and how people speak about one another, you realize the soul's sick. And what we do, all of a sudden you realize, wow, I'm saying stuff and I know it's coming out of a sick heart. It's a big shout to the church when John does this. He's saying, I want your soul to be right. I mean, he's writing this out. Make sure your soul is well. Jesus has talked to the fool who forgot about his soul. He's talked to the anxious person and said that your soul is the problem. Your soul is the problem, and you won't look at your soul. You're looking at everything else and looking for a source to help you. He's saying, keep your soul well. And I was actually just thinking, I wonder how many hours today you spent on your soul. I know you spent some time at work. I know you spent some time sorting stuff out. And I know you spent some time eating. I know you spent some time planning. I know you spent some whole lot of stuff. But I wonder how much time you thought, I want to just check out my soul. Your soul. You, the person, to make sure it's well. See, emotional data that you get is not a command. You're not told to do it. I won't say it again. Emotional data is not a command. It's not something you have to obey. You don't have to do it. Sometimes when you ask people, especially kids, why did you do that? I don't know, it just felt like it. And then you get some adults and say, why did you do that? And say, I don't know, it just felt like it. It's because their soul's sick. They don't know. They just followed a feeling because data had a meaning, so they reacted. Why did they do it? It's really stupid, I know, but it just felt like it. Are you going to get your soul fixed? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do this. Why? Because I feel like it. And that's what happens in a sick soul. And that's what Jesus is looking to address in order that we can move beyond where we're at. Why did you do it? I don't know it. And you can see the mess that brings when we just follow what we feel. And yet so often we are caught with that in this world. And emotions are information, but they can determine, wait for it, your mood. And when your mood is determined, all of a sudden, it's not just your mood. Because you've seen it. I've watched people huff who said, I'm not huffing. Not right, guys? I'm not huffing. I've seen women do it as well. I'm not huffing. I'm being dead mature. No, you're not. You're just huffing. But somewhere we tell ourselves these lies and we think, no, I'm really actually doing okay. But once you do that and you allow that to happen, all of a sudden it shapes your temperament. And your temperament's your personality. So then everybody's walking about and says, look, there's old Huffy on. There's old Grumpy Gwen. Got the two G's there, didn't I? GG, Grumpy Gwen. But I mean, all of a sudden, like, you allow that data to come feeling an emotion that touches you to a place where you just absorb what it is and become that. And Jesus is trying to tell us when he's talking about being anxious, when he's saying about forgetting about your soul, that's where we go. And all of a sudden we say, but it's just the way I am. But it's not. If you're a believer, it's not the way you are, and it's not the way I am, and it's not the way that we're meant to follow on. Don't let that become, you get a prevailing mood of being angry or being depressed or being huffy or being, don't say too much, they'll just get all annoyed with you or whatever. And it just changes because you think and behave different. And we don't want that. Now here's the unfortunate thing. Many people here moving the gifts of the Spirit. Put your hand up, quickly. Have a word of knowledge, prophesy, Put your hand up again so I can say, okay, let me just say this to you. That will not help you one iota with what I'm talking about or what Jesus is talking about. It doesn't help you. I'm filled with Spirit. I don't care. I really don't care. I speak in tongues. I don't care whether you can levitate. It doesn't really mean anything when we're talking about your soul. It really, really doesn't matter. But I prophesied all these great things. I do not care. I just need to look at the Corinthian church and all the strife and division and immorality, and they're taking each other people to court, and they're crucifying and speaking about people, and they've got all this stuff going off, and yet they're moving the gifts of the Spirit. They're flowing in it. What's that tell me? It tells me that after the fall, people's soul became subservient to their body. And when you become born again, Jesus does something spectacular. He says, you're not a slave to that anymore. Doesn't mean to say we walk away from it, by the way, but you're not a slave to it. And he says, I want to bring the change that you can deal with data the right way. You see, my soul connects to the Spirit of God that's in me, that communicates with him. But my soul can also connect to this world and run that way. And a lot of Christians do that. I have, you have. And we need to be ever so careful about it. Really, really do. Galatians 5:16 is a beautiful illustration in regard to what the flesh is. Have you ever read it? It's interesting. It really is interesting what it actually... Let me just say. I'll look at 5 and 17 as well. What do you hear what it says? Have we got it up on the screen here, Gwen? 16 to 21? Yeah. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. Talking about your body. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now, the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality. This is something that you might feel. It's an emotion. It's how you get caught up. Impurity, sensuality, adultery, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, division, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like that. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So here it's been very clear. This is what happens in your body, and if you allow your soul to go down that road, you'll get caught with that, where you'll be fighting, you'll be arguing, doing all sorts of stuff, and you'll be hanging on to stuff that's actually poisoning you. And you miss the kingdom, that's what he's saying. And Jesus freed us from all that. Data given meaning. So you can feel, I feel I want to create a division by doing this or whatever, or jealousy or whatever I was reading out, that flesh, and connect your soul to this world. And I think so often we've been so unkind to one another in church. Is there anybody called Thomas here? You? Oh. I thought you were going to say Thomas. You're called Keith. Is there anybody called Thomas here? Because I want to talk about Thomas. You're called Thomas. See Thomas, sir? You've been so unkind to him, you called him Doubting Thomas. Have you ever heard of Doubting Thomas in the Bible? Why do we call him Doubting Thomas? Let me ask you a question. When he said, these are the words that he says, unless I see the holes in his hand, put my finger in his side, I'm not going to believe. What happened when he met Jesus? Tell me what Jesus said. Thomas, you're a doubter and I hate you. You're full of just, no. He didn't. He says, knock yourself out. Here we go. But we're not like that. We say, no, you're a doubter. But Jesus never does that. And we become unkind because of how we look at soulish things and on how we operate in our soul, and how we engineer and pull people down. If we never learn how to love one another across these aspects, we are actually missing one of the biggest things about our soul that way you can miss. He didn't look at him. He just said, here's another person. Have you ever heard of Martha and Mary? Martha was wonderful. Martha came here tonight and made sure the heat was on. Martha put the lights on. Martha made sure that the coffee was going. Martha made sure the doors were open and the car park was on. And Martha made sure the worship. Martha done all those things. If Martha hadn't have done it, you wouldn't have been just as comfortable as you are. because we need Martha. But yet we've been unkind to Martha because she didn't sit at the feet of Jesus. Well, let me tell you, see, Mary sat at the feet of Jesus. Now, we all like to sit at the feet of Jesus, but you really need a Martha. Because you hadn't got a Martha, you went hungry. Because she was making lunch. Now, she might have had a bit of an attitude, but she was doing what needed to be done. And there's so many of us in church say, well, I just come in and I'll just sit here and I'll let Martha do it all. Because I want to sit at the feet of Jesus. And I get that, because we need both. But let's not crucify Martha because we're a Mary. You know, and maybe if you're a Mary, you need to be a bit of a Martha for a while. And work that out. And maybe if you're nothing but a Martha, maybe they get down and sit at the feet of Jesus. But you need to understand we need them both. Because if we don't have them both and understand the nature and stop living out of what our soul says it's away from God, we're going to miss so much about church. We're going to get really caught up in a mess. See, Mary always forgets about you. Martha doesn't. Martha is making sure that you're all right and wants to serve into you. One of the things that I do during counselling at times, I would lift the ball and throw it to somebody, or a pen or whatever, and the automatic thing to do is to catch it, right? If you've been in, I'd probably have done that on you. And I'll keep doing it, and you'll keep catching it, and then I'll say this: you don't need to catch that. And they go, what? I said, well, throw it at me, and you throw it at me, and I just let it just bounce off me. I said, well, I didn't have to catch it, it's a choice. And we don't need to catch the emotions and the data that comes through our head. You need to measure it. You need to think about it. You don't have to pick it up, especially if somebody nails you to be frustrated or unfriendly or angry, and you accept it. Now, hear me here. If it's a wrong diagnosis about who you are, it becomes a problem. Because if you catch it and don't check it out, you're going to be in a mess. You really will end up in a mess. And I'm asking you to slow down tonight and just think about your emotional makeup. If you give it meaning, if someone says, you're always frustrated, and you say, well, I am. People just say to me, you're always frustrated. And I'm going, not, I'm busy. No, you act frustrated. I don't care what way I'm acting. I'm busy. And if I don't do this, it's not going to happen because I'm Lewis Martha. And I need to get this stuff done. And because you want to sit there and be Mary, I've got to be a Martha. So I've got to keep pushing things through. But you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I'm just making sure I get the stuff done. But if I had accepted that, it would have messed with me and caused me to catch something that I didn't need to catch. In Galatians 5:17, what did it say? For the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh, for these are opposed to each other. What meaning you give to words people, what is the meaning of the words what meaning do you give to the words people speak over you? Just a question. What meaning do you give to the words I'm speaking tonight? Because there are two words or two voices speaking tonight. There's my voice and your voice. And they're both speaking. There's what I say to you, and then there's what you say about what I say to you. Isn't that right? And the most powerful voice in this room is yours. More powerful than Jesus. Lewis, did you say it? Absolutely did. Your voice is more powerful than Jesus. During my time and my spell away on holidays, as I told you about in the dark days, I remember lying in the room and, doing the usual, up the bed, down the bed, rolling over, nurse, give me more drugs, or whatever it was. And I knew that Jesus was in the room. I knew it. He was in the distance because my voice was shouting. What's going on? What's this? What's that? It was louder than anything in the room. And I could clearly see him on the other side of the room. I knew he was there, but my voice was louder. And I was so conscious. My voice is a lot louder than yours. It was strange. But it is so real, and sometimes we don't work that out. See, a person can come to you and say innocently something, and you just get offended because you've got a meaning to it. And it's nothing what they ever thought or wanted to lay in you. But you give the word meaning. And when you give it meaning, your soul is doing something. If somebody uses that word, and you will nail them and say that means, and you're just wrong. It's just what you're doing. You're giving it meaning. Does that make sense to you? You might feel judged by the word they use because of the meaning you attach to it, and it bursts feelings, and they become your storyline on how you live. Well, I'm not going to talk to Grumpy Gwen or Alan. I'm trying to think of an A. What could I say for A? I can think of a whole lot of A's, but I can't use them here. Arrogant Alan. Listen. You could have went other places to get insulted, but they'll never be as good as coming here. Gwen isn't grumpy and Alan isn't arrogant. No, they're not. They're not. We're just using it as an illustration. Adorable Alan and great Gwen. There you go. But somewhere you need to stop for a minute and think, you can give your life a storyline. And it becomes invisible. You can have a word that you've set up and say, here's the meaning to that word, or when somebody uses that. And when that's used, you can get offended, and it gets into your soul, and it starts to shape you, and it's totally invisible to you. You can't see it. You just live it, but other people see you living it. And that happens so often in our world. It becomes embedded in your soul. I remember a person that I knew used to always say to me, nobody sees me because I'm invisible. And I went, I think you're very visible, but that's how they felt. In their soul, they had put meaning to how they perceived people and said, I'm invisible. And believed that every place that they were, this guy just thought, I'm invisible, nobody sees me. And it was a hurt, and it was terrible, it was horrible to watch, but they believed it, and it governed them. And if you love God and serve God, it doesn't change that. Speak in tongues, it doesn't change it. Raising the dead doesn't change it. Nothing changes because it's happening in you. And if you don't deal with what's happening in you, you can't ever change. You will just be damaged in your soul. And you'll apply daft remedies to solve a massive spiritual problem. And you will lie to yourself and say, this will fix it. And it won't. It just won't do it. And the Lord's trying to address this in us all. Saying, think about your soul. Think about your soul, whether you're rich, whether you're anxious. It doesn't think about your soul. And he says to John, make sure you're well in your soul. And there are other verses that will look the heavy soul, the troubled soul, the tortured soul, the restless one. We'll have a look at some of them next week. The 12 disciples, I have to watch my time. The 12 disciples, now how long were they with Jesus? Somebody tell me, somebody really smart. 3 years, right? Just over 3 years. They sat with Jesus. Let me explain something to you. Out of the 3 years, Jesus, the master, the creator, never dented what was in their soul. What do you mean? Well, Judas was always Judas. No matter what Jesus done, he was always Judas. Didn't make a dent in his soul. Peter was always Peter. Peter was still not worshiping Satan, not to be wrong, but getting his heart full by him and saying the wrong thing. Get behind me, Satan, he said. Why? Because no matter what it was, he couldn't work it out. Peter couldn't work out that Jesus loved everybody. He really couldn't. How do you work that out? Acts 10, he sent down a sheet, and he says, hey, don't call anything unclean that I call clean. God had to do it 3 times, right? Because Peter was still undented. And I'm going to tell you, he was filled with the Holy Spirit when that happened. He was anointed of God. He couldn't work it out. Why? Because his soul was damaged. And Jesus is saying that you really need to look at your soul. Pay attention to your soul, what's happening in it. Stop doing daft things, think that's going to help you when you're manifesting sickness, when you're manifesting things that you know are wrong about how you think and how you deal with people, and you're like, this is wrong. Stop trying to fix it with stupid stuff, because the Lord doesn't want you to do that. I want to add something else. Meaning is more powerful than your destiny. Adding meaning to something is more powerful than your destiny. Because you can have a destiny, but if you add the wrong meaning, you'll not go to it. When you add a meaning to a word, it's like a train you get on that takes you somewhere. And it can take you away from where God wants to take you because you haven't looked after your soul. That's what happened, Mark. That's what happened, Jonah. That's what was happening in the boat when they were saying, Jesus, don't you care? That's what was taking place. They were getting onto a boat somewhere else that was taking them to a different destiny. And that had to be worked out. False meanings on words that are spoken derail you and derail me. And if you get it wrong, you feel lost. Roy touched on this a while ago in the book of Genesis. He was talking, was it Genesis 50, Roy? And he was talking about Joseph. It's a powerful story, the story. I know Roy preached a good sermon, but this is what Joseph says when he meets his brothers. And he says, but Joseph said to them, don't fear. Do you remember the story? Yeah? Yeah, we're all on the same page. Do not fear, for I am in the place of God. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. I don't know why the verse 21's up there. So he says, do not fear. This is Joseph. I'm going to provide for you. He kept his soul intact through all the mess to the point where he's able to help other people. He worked on his soul when he was in prison, when he was accused of doing wrong, when he was in a pit, even when he was in a palace. He said, I'm going to keep my soul right. Why? Because this is really important. And when the pressure's on, the thing is you want to just say, well, my soul doesn't count. And I'm saying your soul counts for everything. And that's really what Jesus wants for us to work out and get a hold of so we're not caught and stuck. When he decided not to have a victim mentality, poor me or whatever, his meaning that he attached to this caused his next move to appear. I'm going to provide right in the center of God's will because he worked on his soul. That's why it's so important for us to stop and think about our soul. Emotions need passports. When someone tries to get into your head, say, have you got a right to come in here? You got to ask the questions. Why is that data here today? Why is that here? What's brought that about? How long is it going to be here? Where did you come from, data? Have you got friends in here? Are you coming because your mate's here and I've let somebody else in? Are you coming because something else is here and you want to back it up? I mean, you need to check your head out. You need to interrogate. I mean, if you go into a country, you come in, they've got the border police, and they stop you and say, what are you doing? Why are you here? How long are you going to stay? And you need to do that with the stuff that's coming into your head, because you don't, it's going to destroy you and destroy me. You need to think where it came from. Check your head out and stop being daft. I'm going to say something else. Your emotions that you have need a safe place, and that isn't church. Hebrews 12 and 15 says this. Henry shared with me the other day, and I thought, Henry, where did you find that? He says in the Bible. Hebrews 12 and 15 says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness, no poison is able to come in to your mind as data. Because data with a meaning to it, you're sunk. You're sunk. Watch it doesn't spring up and cause trouble, for by it many become defiled. They become stained. And when you run with people who are already stained and they open you to data, if you're not careful and don't check that out, you become poisoned on the inside. And the writer of Hebrews saying, don't do this. This is going to defile you and defile others. And you need to be so careful, and you need to be protected from that. See, the truth is, in church, we've majored on inspiration. Everybody does have inspiration. But we're minor on wisdom. And I'm reading you wisdom tonight. And when people sound inspirational, I'm going to tell you about inspiration. If I was able to inspire you tonight, by the time you leave this church tonight, you'll have forgot about it. But wisdom follows you all the days of your life. That's why the Word of God's so important. That's why we need to understand how it affects us. It travels with you. It accompanies you. It's like a while ago I said, excuse me, I said, I'm going to delete Facebook. Do you remember that? And I deleted the app instead of Facebook. But I worked it out and got it sorted. But here's the thing. Facebook tracks you and I on your iPhone. It tracks you. And it is wisdom to dump it. Because it doesn't say, I'm not going to look at it. It's going to track you. It's going to shut. It's going to find you. And all the junk with it is coming at you. But when I find a safe place, I realize it allows me to love you. And what do you hear? And to love me. It allows me to love you and allows me to love me with grace at the same time. With grace at the same time. Church is full of nosy people. Please don't be one. Don't ask questions that you shouldn't ask, because it's none of your business. I'm being serious. I just heard the other day, and I was shocked by it. Somebody said, somebody the other day was asking somebody else, how much money do they earn? I thought, what on earth's got to do with you? But they thought that was appropriate. And I'm going, you see, that's not right. Some of the questions I've been asked in my life, I think, why would you even ask me that? What's it got to do with you? I'm going to tell you something I done many, many years ago, and I learned something from it. I was sitting, and a guy was coming and being my friend, and being very supportive, and it was really nice. So I let my guard down and shared something. And it was a bit like this. I said, look, sometimes, because they asked me how you getting on in ministry, I says, well, sometimes, I just don't know what way's forward, but I do trust God and He'll work it out. And I was being very vulnerable and very open and probably felt very insecure then. It wasn't 6 months to pass and they come back and this is what they said to me. Sure, who are you? How can you even lead? You don't even know when God's talking to you. And wow, that went in like a knife. And this is what I learned. Boundaries are important. And I need to watch my data. I need to watch what I'm sharing. I need to think where. And church isn't the safest place, and you need to be very careful. Some people share stuff, and I think you should never share it. Some of you need to actually learn when somebody says to you, tell me this, what's your take-home pay? That you think, wow, why would you even ask a question like that? I'll just bounce it off them. You need to learn answers that shut people down when it's not their business. Because it's not. And it's not you being nasty, it's you protecting you. And protecting them, because why would they even want to know? Why would they want to know that question? It just passes over my head. I can't understand it. You see, here's the truth. I know you don't believe this, but everybody has ugly on the inside. You know ugly old you? Do I need to say that again? So a lot of people sit here and you're ugly. I'm telling you, you could have went to a better place than this and get insulted. We all have ugly, so be careful with your ugly. Because not everybody can handle it. Well, not everybody needs to know it. And you need to understand that. And if you're going to just spurt it out, believe me, you're going to wound yourself and wound other people. It's not smart. You've got to be very, very careful. I'm always safe when I check the data that comes into my head and look for a passport and a visa and make sure it's all up to date and say, nah, I'm not letting that in. I can work that out. Although if somebody said something about the Queen, congratulations, Elizabeth II, that you've done 70 years. I just think that's phenomenal. Whether you like the monarch or not, doesn't matter, just to do that. Somebody was talking and said, they were talking about the Queen, and they said, the Queen's my friend. I said, look, excuse me, the Queen is not your friend, but the Queen is friendly. And we can be friendly, but it doesn't give you the right to say I'm your friend and you must tell me. That's a misdemeanor. It really, really is. I can be friendly with people, but it doesn't mean to say I allow them to search my soul unless I want to. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm asking you to protect your soul and to think about how you work. You see, that leaves me in the place where I can love you the best I can, and I can love me by protecting me. And we can work like that. Other people will feel that you're controlling them when you do that, but that's down to them. I don't have to tell people how I feel. Even you say, how are you feeling this? I'm thinking, it's nothing to do with you, David. I don't. Not there to you, and I'm just saying, just relax with that. It's okay. Don't need to be rude. Just say, I'm doing okay. You don't have to spill it out, only if you want to. Don't give people hints. I'm done. Don't give people hints. Why this? This is what I say in my office. Somebody comes into my office and start to shout at me. This is what I won't say, don't shout at me, I don't like it. I never say that. This is what I say, Adam, when you come in and shout at me. I say, Adam, if you shout once more, you're just going to have to leave because I'm not even talking to you. That's not a hint. I'm just telling you dead straight. It's not a hint. And that's how I deal with it. Because lots of people have been wanted to have said, you need to stop. I don't talk to you like that. Stop it or leave. You know, that's me setting in a boundary. No hints. Not being rude with it and just saying, look, we're not going to do that. When we talk about passport, it is about having self-respect. It's not about the other person respect. You're saying, I need to have some self-respect. Don't give anybody else your emotional well-being for them to manage. I know if somebody says, well, if you're not nice to me, I'm going to not speak to you anymore. That's fine. Let them not talk to you. Let them move on. If somebody's kind to you all the time, you think, I better tell them so they're kind to me. You need to stop that. Don't get caught in that. That affects you. Jesus talks about your soul. Jesus once was troubled in his soul. Let me just read it to you, John 12. 2 scriptures to read and we're done. Come on up, worship team, please. John 12. Is this helpful at all? Be all right if I have a go at it next week? Would you like to hear some more about your soul next week? Because if we don't get this right, we're going to have a really long, hard life. So I'm looking up Matthew when I should be looking up John. I like to look it up in the Bible. I don't trust that in case you put up the wrong one. John 12, verse 27. Would you hear what it says? This is Jesus speaking. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I have come in to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven and said, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. When you're troubled in your soul, remember the commission that God gave you. Lord, glorify your Son, glorify your name. That's why I'm here. You're not here for you. You're not here for anybody else. You're here for him. It means that he actually does really rule in your life. Psalm 107, can I read this one? You're still tuning in, are you? The answer is yes, Liz. Thank you, thank you. Psalm 107, verse 9. Somebody quoted it off the top of their head. Would you hear this? This is beautiful. Let's just finish with this. For he satisfies the longing soul. Boom. And the hungry soul he fills with good things. We started off with panting, and we're finishing off with his answer. I satisfy the longing soul. Your soul is so important. It's not your spirit. It's not your body. You're a living soul. And Jesus needs to communicate that to us more and more and more for us to actually really prosper. Stand to your feet.
take